Hello, and welcome to the Blue Shadow Podcast. My name is Joey.
I am Dan.
And today we're very excited to talk about the Acolyte Episode 3. You may notice that this episode is a day late. My wife and I were traveling, and we were out of town, and it disrupted our recording schedule. And on top of that, we're going to do some shifting around in terms of, at least as long as the Acolyte is still in the air, we're going to plan on releasing our episodes on Wednesdays following the Tuesday night release of the Acolyte. So hopefully that'll keep it a little more timely, have something to listen to that's more fresh in your mind, give you that kind of coverage before the next episode comes out, because we're really releasing it now one day before the next episode comes out. So
yes,
that's what we're planning on doing in the meantime. So with that in mind, we're going to try and keep it brief. We're going to skip over our usual introduction of what are we watching, reading, and playing, and really just get into episode 3. Dan, what did you think of episode 3 before we, move into it?
I liked it. I thought it was different. It was a side of Star Wars we don't get to see very often.
I agree.
And I see why people have the complaints they do. However, I'm not one of those people.
I have, as we always talk about, some complaints are always valid. Mm-hmm. Some complaints are not.
Correct.
We don't need to spend too much time on that. But
no, we don't. We appreciate what the haters have to say, because a lot of times they do make valid comments. Almost everything critics say is rooted in some form of truth. However, Star Wars fans especially have this beautiful, wonderful talent of taking things and snowballing it. So we're just not going to dive into that, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. That does bring us to episode 3, which was titled Destiny. Before we talk about the meaning, I wanted to bring up the idea that there's no slashy in this.
Yes, I have a theory for that.
Go ahead. I think I might have a theory.
First 2 episodes, we were watching 2 separate storylines.
Mm-hmm.
This episode, Destiny, both the storylines that we were following, May and Osha, were together.
Yeah. We
don't need a slash, because both of them were on Destiny.
Yeah.
Because what were the prior 2 episodes called? Like Anger and Justice. Hold on, I'm pulling up. Lost and Found.
Yeah, and Revenge and Justice, I think.
Revenge and Justice. One of them is clearly Osha, one of them is clearly May.
Mm-hmm.
However, Destiny refers to, they are both facing their destiny.
Mm-hmm. And I love, one of my favorite, this is really something that listening to Force Center helped me with. They bring up the concept of destiny is not like, this is what you will do. It brings you to a point of choosing what you'll do. Mm-hmm. And that's what destiny is.
Ooh,
and I think
like
that's
that.
very, very much so in line with what they've used that to describe the originals, prequels, and sequels all the way through whatever. And I think this is very reflective of that, especially with the way that both Mother Anastasia and the Jedi treat Osha. Mm-hmm. But we'll get there.
Yes.
I do agree that's kind of that destiny thing. And I think that's an intriguing thought, because I initially thought like, oh, maybe this is destiny and we'll get like the other half of the episode, because, we kind of jump around. We'll talk about that in a second, but maybe we get the other half of the episode and it has like, wouldn't have a slash. I don't know. I like your idea a lot better.
Thank you.
I think that's about all I have to say on that. How about you?
Yeah, me too. I thought it was Destiny, pretty appropriate title for this episode.
Definitely. For characters, the only 2 major characters that are really introduced here that we don't know are Mother Anastasia and Mother Koro. What did you have to think about both of those characters?
I think, like all parents, one is, I don't want to say a disciplinarian, but Mother Coral clearly has, I don't want to say her own agenda, but I think Mother Coral is placing the agenda of the Coven prior, where Mother Anastasia is more of, the girls are the priority right now.
Yes, which we'll talk more about the parallels between these 2 characters. I did want to say I loved Mother Anastasia, first of all, and I thought Mother Coral was fantastic, like alien makeup. I thought that was so cool.
The practical effects have all been pretty spot on.
I really have enjoyed the way that they've incorporated the aliens, both practical and CG, into the show. I thought it was really nice, very, again, refreshing, because I feel like sometimes with like Mandalorian, it's like they got this costume from Solo and they're going to put it in a different shirt and send them in. I feel like this is like very intentional. I really like it. So we last time did the characters, the where, when. The only where we have here is Brendock, which we've heard about from the first 2 episodes. And that brings us to the when, which is that the fact that this whole entire episode It's not even framed as a character telling a story. It's just takes place in the past.
Yep, 16 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
From the current storyline.
I thought that was a really intriguing choice. Mm-hmm. I liked it. Because I was like, I want to know what happened. I want to know what happened. I want to know what happened.
Right.
And they give us what we'll ultimately find is half the answers.
Yeah.
And I love that. Because it was like, they gave you what you wanted, but they left you hungry for so much more. And honestly, maybe even left you with more questions.
Yes.
Were you happy to see this is where this was taking place?
I'm glad we saw it when we did. Mm-hmm. And like you said, even though it is most likely only half the story, I'm glad we find somebody's perspective, some account of what happened. And it just allows you, I think it humanizes everybody just a little bit more.
And it allows you to kind of have a frame of reference moving forward that makes you maybe care about these characters more, or be nervous for these characters more or something. But like I said, we're going to kind of move through the story relatively quickly for this episode. But we have May and Osha kind of existing in the wildlife on Brendok. It starts with Osha sitting under the bunta tree, which is what was used to make the poison that killed Torben in the previous episode. And May tells us this is where she always goes. And both of them kind of use the Force in this strange way to, like, dark side this butterfly. And despite this, them both using it, May kind of seems more intense of the two. Did you have any thoughts on this introduction and, like, them both? I was a little confused as to who was who at first, kind of, because of the dark side kind of thing.
Yes. I feel like what we saw is in line with the characters that we were introduced to in episodes 1 and 2. Osha was very more, just wanted to be in tune with her surroundings, and Meg, I don't want to say just wanted to kind of show off, but she knew she was getting stronger with the Force and just wanted to test it. Because I don't think, it didn't appear to me that she was going to do anything nefarious other than just see
how powerful she was.
Like, could she do it?
So that's happening, and Osha's kind of doing this because she's nervous about this upcoming ceremony called the Ascension. And so the twins end up heading back home to get ready prepare for their training and get ready for the Ascension. But we kind of see young Master Soul watching them in the distance. This poses a lot of questions, and we'll continue to talk about this as we move forward. But so we know that the Jedi are here on this planet watching these kids. And when they get back into the fortress, Mother Coral is kind of unhappy with them sneaking out. She says they need to be punished. They don't get any spiced creams, which they released a recipe for, and I kind of want to make them now.
Ooh, like cinnamon?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the exact recipe. Probably.
I feel like nutmeg.
It probably tastes like Christmas.
Yeah.
But so they... we see Mother Coral getting really upset, but Mother Anastasia is much gentler, like you talked about. And she's like, give them the spice creams. Gosh. Yeah. And I think that kind of sets up that dynamic that we were talking about. We then, after that, get into this concept of the idea of the Force that these witches have. I would honestly say that these witches appear to be more Jedi Sith-like than Night Sisters. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I feel like the Force, at least to them, is more of like a central theme rather than a tool.
Yeah, and the Night Sisters is very much so like a tool. And that brings us to the idea of this lesson that Mother Anastasia was teaching. And that's where she refers to what we know from our perspective as the Force as the thread. It's very similar to the way that the Force is described by Obi-Wan or anyone Luke, anyone describing the Force. She says that it's like it connects everyone, and it's not necessarily a power to use, but it's something that you pull on if you need to adjust the connections between things. And I thought that was a really cool way, and very honestly in line with the way the Jedi approaches the Force.
Yes.
Again, very different than the Night Sisters.
I know, and I think this is gonna, not to cut you off, I think this is gonna lead into a great why later on. Like, we're seeing all these parallels between. Did they ever say what they were called, what their coven was, other than just
the coven, which is
the coven and the Jedi?
I think we might find out exactly what is going on later. We'll talk about.
I think right now we're seeing them on tangential lines,
and this is loosely related, but I wanted to talk about my thoughts on different interpretations of the Force. There are several different things throughout all of Star Wars where the Force is viewed differently. I've talked about the Night Sisters. The first time I was introduced to this concept of there being like people who view the Force, the same thing that the Jedi call the Force, they view it differently. And this was in the Legends of Luke Skywalker book. It came out around The Last Jedi. And this is like an island on this planet that had like a big island, and they referred to the Force as the tide. And it was like the coming and going, like kind of how like you don't have control over the Force. you're just kind of there with it situation.
Yeah.
And I was like I don't want to say put off, but I was like, this is weird. I don't love this. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if anyone who hasn't been familiar with something like that, where they're using the Force in different ways, do you think that it was odd for them to kind of get used to this concept of referring to the Force as a different thing?
I don't think so. I think it was, when you say like using the Force as a different thing.
Like, I think that the thread and the Force are the exact same thing.
Oh, 100%, yes.
Do you think that someone who's less exposed to that sort of concept of the Force being viewed as something different by a different group of people is like, do you think that was hard for some people to adjust to?
No.
Good.
I think...
Because when I read about the tide, I was like, I don't really like this.
Mother Anastasia did a great job of explaining why it's the thread and how you can pull on it and pull on others. And the Jedi described the Force as this omnipotent thing that anybody can tap into. Mm-hmm.
Surrounds us.
Yeah.
All that jazz.
It sounds almost like if it's surrounding us and binding us, it'll pull on somebody.
Almost sounds like a thread, doesn't it?
Almost, I think so, but what do I know?
I love it. I was just interested to get your perspective on that, on what you thought about a different Force idea. So I like that. Mm-hmm. But after that, we get to the Force lesson that Mother Anastasia is teaching. And she's kind of using the Force in the way that Force pushing, doing what we'd expect. But did you notice that it kind of sounded a little different? Like, it sounded similar. Like, it sounded like if the Force is like one flavor of ice cream, the thread is ice cream, but it sounded a little different. I thought that was really cool.
Me too. And I want to talk about the sensory aspect of the Force in a little bit. Okay. When we get to the ceremony, I want to talk about it.
I'm excited to see what you would say. We haven't discussed the details of these episodes much because we want to, kind of get genuine conversation. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to see what Dan has to say. But so Mother Anastasia is like the twins are kind of getting distracted. Mother Anastasia wants them to defend themselves from her Force pushing her, thread pulling. I don't know.
Pushing, attacking.
So Osha does not want to partake in this. She's clearly thrown off by this whole ascension thing, and May ends up defending them both. And this lesson, though, as this is happening, was interrupted by like this like weird sound. Mm-hmm. And I think could this be some kind of faulty equipment or a power generator or something?
I think it's the power generator.
And I think we see that later, which we'll talk about. So this is weird. Something's going on with this power generator.
Yes. It seems like the place where they are at was not originally theirs.
Definitely not. Because they said they're in exile. Yeah. We'll talk about that. Why, maybe, who knows. But it definitely is a place that they have gone to.
Yes. And it's like you show up at an abandoned house, you flip the switch, and there's electricity. And
is it abandoned? Who knows?
I don't know. We'll see.
So after that's happening, we cut to this conversation where Osha says she doesn't want to undergo this. She doesn't want to become a witch. And May is really upset by this. But Mother Anastasia says, like, the galaxy doesn't accept people like us. You need to stay with us to protect yourself and all of that kind of stuff. And I just think for being a witch has a certain connotation to it. Night Sister, Wicked Witch of the West, all that. But I think Mother Anastasia really does show this gentler, softer side. Mm-hmm. And I really like that about her a lot.
Can I give one aside real quick? I know we said we're not doing watching, reading.
Go ahead.
I'm actually listening to the Wizard of Oz audiobook.
Oh my gosh.
So when you said Wicked Witch. Anyway, back on point.
Oh man.
I know. I don't think you were ready.
I would not. I did not know what he was going to say, but I would never have ever thought that. But anyway.
Gotta read the classics.
Gotta read the High Republic. Anyway. Now we're going to talk about the Ascension. They say they haven't done this since they've gone into exile. Mm-hmm. And they were forced into exile because their powers were dark. What could they have done to be forced into exile? Why were they forced into exile? Where were they? Yeah. Where are they now? These are the things that for me are like, I think this episode is clearly from the Witch's perspective, or the Coven's perspective, and it paints the Jedi in a very poor light.
Yes. I agree.
And I think the truth is probably somewhere in between the two perspectives and like what's right. Mm-hmm. And I think, and I have some parallels I want to talk about later on, but what do you think could have happened? I mean, I know it's like the world is your oyster here, but like, do you think they've done something wrong?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
one of the questions that you and I personally talked about last episode was, why are the Jedi on Brendok? I think we know.
Because they've done something.
Because they're there for the witches.
And they know that the twins are a thing.
They know that they're probably doing some shady stuff that they weren't supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of, we'll get there, but kind of what they're accused of.
Yeah.
So I think there's much more to be considered here.
Yes.
And I think it may reframe when we learn what happens, how we feel about this episode. And I think something we could potentially do, we haven't discussed this. We're having an on-air business meeting, I guess, but we could talk about like retroactively what we thought about some of the big story stuff in addition to like just doing a finale review.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so they're forced into exile. Then we have this ceremony happening, and the moons align in a familiar color scheme, which kind of looks like the logo.
Looks like the new logo.
The new logo, yes.
We'll talk about the old logo in a little bit.
Oh, come on. Anyway, the moons align, and May undergoes the ascension, and that's where she gets the marking on her face.
And this is what I wanted to talk about with the Force that we haven't seen before. We actually were able to see it. Mm-hmm. We could see Mother Asaya pull it down, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it was so... And, like, do you think it had anything to do with this particular time?
I think so. I think... Have you seen the movie Coneheads?
No.
But...
You can spoil Coneheads.
There's a scene where all the moons align, and it's this big deal. And when the moons align, there's more power. So I think it's the same thing.
Like Sozin's Comet.
And it's almost like in Ahsoka, when everything aligned, they were able to do it. Yeah. And I think, yes, and I think it's no coincidence that they found a very exposed yet hidden place to have this super secret ceremony.
Yes. So May gets it. She gets the marking on her forehead that we see. And last time we had talked about, does Indara know that it was May? Yes.
Indara 100%. Definitely knew it was
Indara, and you can see it on her face. So this is another example of us learning more and clarifying some questions we had previously. Even kind of in an indirect way like that. So before Osha can do this, which she still was not looking very happy about this, they're interrupted by the Jedi, who they said they've sliced their way in. So the Jedi are very clearly breaking into this place.
Oh, yeah.
We see Indara, Sol, Kalnaka, and Torben enter, the 4 Jedi that we knew May is after in the present day of the story. Indara claims that, we thought this place was uninhabited. Okay, Indara.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't love that.
Indara seemed like a pot stirrer.
Oh, my God, yeah. And the Jedi say that they're concerned that the children that are with them, which they have not yet seen, technically, like from the perspective of the witches, that the children are being trained by the Coven, which is against Republic law. The Mother Anasea says that planet is not part of the Republic. But do you think that the Jedi are being hypocritical? Like, they're kind of like, we're the only people that can teach Force things.
I think it's really hard to make that statement without knowing why.
That's what I wanted to
why
say.
The witches are in exile.
You passed the test that I was setting up for you. Because they want you to... I think they want you to say, the Jedi are being hypocrites. Rah, rah, rah. But...
Everybody loves Revenge of the Sith. I think many Star Wars fans can agree on that.
I think that's definitely true.
Before we get the Battle of the Heroes between Anakin and Obi-Wan on Mustafar, Obi-Wan makes a statement saying, well, the Sith are evil. And Anakin goes, well, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil. Same thing. That's the first thing I thought of. I'm like... Somebody can always be evil to another person.
And someone can always be good to themselves.
Right.
From their point of view, you know. So, yeah, I think this was a very interesting and uncomfortable dialogue. But we do see, and Sol, who does know the kids are there, call out to them and say, like, come here, which Osha breaks through and comes and talks to him. And there's this very sweet moment, again. It's kind of like he has that look on his face of, like, wanting to help her. Like, I think... Again, I love Sol. I think I might be projecting a little bit of my love for Sol onto this, but it seems like he legitimately wants to help Osha and potentially May. Where he like talks about his past, and like how the Jedi are like a home for him and all of that. And then he gives her his lightsaber and says like, you could have one of these too.
All the more reason, not to put a damper on Sol's character, but like, if the witches really are, it seems like they're going to be accused of doing something pretty bad. That Sol was like, we have to do everything we can to get them out.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of what we were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to say Soul was projecting, putting a facade on for Osha at the time, but I feel like he also could have been like, yeah, I'm gonna do this to get you.
He's there to do a job.
Yeah. But I do think they're...
Like, I think he's being genuine, but I think he may have been told to do that.
And I think their attachment definitely, as we can see, we've seen already, grows.
And up to this point, the witches hadn't done anything. We hadn't seen anything... We haven't seen them do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But we then see, in response to all of this hubbub, Mother Anastasia... What would you call it? Possess or like control Torben's mind and his eyes go black?
I said did a mind trick on him.
It seemed like the darkest version of a mind trick.
Yeah.
So that was that I think to me gave me some like, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Jedi are onto something here that they, we're not quite sure what's going on. So that happened, and then they kind of settle it out, and then they say, we'd like to test the twins to see if they would pass their test to become Jedi. So they kind of part ways, and the Coven has this whole set of discussions where we learn a lot about like the origins of these twins. We learn that Mother Coral carried the twins. Mother Anastasia created them. Mm-hmm. And this does kind of draw you... It makes you want to draw comparisons to Anakin. I wanted to ask you first, how did this revelation of how these twins came to be make you feel?
Surprised.
Me too.
For the short answer. I mean, we don't know anything about Anakin's.
Okay, so
canonically, do we?
We know some. Palpatine implies in Revenge of the Sith, of course, that Darth Plagueis manipulated the midichlorians to create life.
Yeah.
Little side eye. And then there's some comic stuff where like Palpatine is like over Shmi's belly, kind of like cooking like a little baby in a cauldron. That's really the extent of it. In Legends, there was some stuff concretely linking Plagueis to creating Anakin. Mm-hmm. But in canon, it's only been implied or hinted at.
Well, anyway, whether he did or not, they're not mutually exclusive.
I agree.
I mean, it seems like Mother Anastasia is a pretty powerful string user.
That's cute.
Thread user, excuse me. So if she really is as powerful with the Force as we think and we're being led to believe, it wouldn't be surprising.
And there's another quote that I want to talk about in a second. But, actually, I didn't write these down in notes, so we can talk about it right now. Mother Coral says, what if the Jedi found out how they were made? Yeah. Maybe implying that there's some sort of external force meddling here.
Yeah.
Maybe a Sith.
I don't know. I didn't get that vibe.
I didn't either. But I got the vibe that they did something weird.
Oh, 100%.
For me, though, this does feel different from Anakin. It seems like I've seen a few different theories floating around. One suggests like maybe this was a baby, like one normally produced baby that they used their weird magic force thread on to like split it into two, which is why they seem to have like kind of different aspects of one personality. Always one, born as two is the quote from their little chant.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't. I feel like I feel like they were twins from the start because the way Coral says, "I carried them,"
and Mother Anastasia said, "I created them."
Yeah,
implying that they were. I think there's just some weirdness going on.
Well, I think going back to the Force training session, the power of one becomes the power of two becomes the power of one, power of many. So I think we're trying to show that combined, May and Osha
got the power
would be the all powerful or whatever.
I'm really loving this dyad idea.
So I feel like they were definitely intended to be twins, and just so happens
I like this
that one is has a thing for the dark side. What's a penchant? What's a natural pull, inclination,
pull, all of that jazz.
Treats the dark side versus the light side. I don't know. That's very philosophical.
It is very philosophical. But for me, we said we weren't going to talk about the haters. But I feel like for me though, this is a point where it's like, calm down, watch the story, see what happens. Yes. It could even serve to strengthen Anakin's story, make Anakin more special.
Imagine if they get a Darth Plagueis something.
I mean, this could be like the first experiment that led to Anakin.
Because
and
should be around.
I don't like the Chosen One is like a whole thing that I struggle with personally, and like I don't necessarily think that the Chosen One prophecy and the like I don't think these things like the Chosen One prophecy and the creation of Anakin by Plagueis by whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily have to be like exclusive. So I think there's more nuance here that we just need to see.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could talk about that for probably a whole hour. But anyway, the Coven comes up with the idea for the twins to lie in their test. Mm-hmm. So they're going to lie, and then they're going to be like, oh, guess they're not force sensitive. We'll leave you alone. Yeah. Which, in my mind, is like kind of a pretty poor plan. These Jedi are clearly persistent. Yeah. And I don't think that would have stopped them, even if Osha didn't want to go. Right. But anyway, we May and Osha agree to lie. Then we get to they take them to their little Jedi campsite, which I thought was Kanaka was working on the speeder. It was pretty cool. And we get to this where they're taking the test. May passes the test, intentionally fails the test, I guess is what we should say. Right. Osha goes in, and we can see what's on. It's the same test that Anakin was given in Episode 1, which I thought was cool. Yeah. On that little pad with the images, and they have to guess what's showing up. And so Sol is giving it to her, or Sol and Nadara are, and Osha's lying, but Sol tells her that she's correct, and she's unsettled by this. Yeah. And he's able to trick her into saying, like, okay, I know what's happening. And
she even said, that's not right.
Uh-huh. He tricked her. Yeah. It was kind of cute. Like, but then he draws connections to her past and tells her that she can choose what she wants. And I've seen some people, like, get a little like, how can you possibly give a child this choice and have them expect to really know? For me, that's like it's like a fantasy fairy tale sort of thing. I think the choice ends up being the correct thing, like her having the choice. And even Mother Anastasia eventually gets there. Yeah. Which we're going to talk about in a second. But I think that was another strong point for the Jedi and Sol in this, is that it's like, you can choose. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they would have done if she said no. I suspect Indara probably wouldn't have been very happy about that. Yeah. But there's that. Then, so Osha says she wants to become a Jedi. And Mother Anastasia is okay with her decision, but May is really upset. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about it, and May says she's going to kill Osha to stop her from leaving. That's where this fire starts. So there was, in fact, a fire. Mm-hmm. The Jedi weren't lying about the fact that May started a fire. Yes. But he kind of locks Osha in there. Osha's able to escape, and May and Osha end up meeting at this like where the power generator was. Mm-hmm. Power generator's exploding. Before we talk about what happens next, do you think that the Jedi could have sabotaged the power generator when they were having the training scene? I didn't think about that until we started recording.
I feel like if they were to do that, it would be Indara.
Oh, 100%.
But I don't know. That's a little much.
I know it is. And like, did you hear the hesitation in my voice when I was saying it? Because it's like, that is such an un-Jedi
I feel like thing. I feel like there's something happened, but I don't know what. But I'm not going to go as far as to say they
Do you think it was manipulated with?
Yes. By who? I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. So we'll continue on then. May and Osha meet in this room. It was very visually satisfying to have them at different sides of this bridge. And
Broken bridge.
Very thematic.
Yes.
And as this chaos is all happening, May says that Mother Anastasia is dead, and both girls essentially say, it's your fault. Mm-hmm. And as this is happening, May falls down when the bridge breaks, falls into this pit, Darth Maul style, and Sol is able to catch Osha. Mm-hmm. So I think from this, I legitimately think Sol believes that May was actually like dead. He couldn't have saved her. Which again kind of points to maybe the Jedi were doing something sketchy. I do feel like Sol is amongst these four at least the one with the best intentions. Mm-hmm. So that happens. Sol saves her, and as they're leaving, they see the bodies of the witches. And there are a few things that kind of tip you off to something being not quite right here. Sol tells Osha that there was a fire that killed her whole family, right? Mm-hmm. May started a fire that killed her whole family. When we see the witches all laying there dead, first, Mother Anastasia is there. Mother Coral is not there. Mm-hmm. And no one's burned. No one is... there's not a fire in that room.
I'll play devil's advocate, smoke inhalation. Is that a thing? Star Wars carbon monoxide.
Oh my god.
Wait, what? Would you expect them to be laying on their back with a lightsaber slash?
Do you recall how Uncle Owen looked after a fire?
Uncle Owen was lit directly on fire.
That is in fact true. But I think there's something that we did. I think there's something we didn't see here. I think this was not related to the fire. You can disagree with me. It's totally fine. We don't often disagree.
I agree there's something. I don't... But what could it be?
This is Tech Watch.
Could it be something as silly as the fire may started, fried a wire, shorted the power generator, caused an earthquake, and debris fell on them?
Something downstream of that, potentially, yes. I think... Why were the Jedi there? I think there's something going on, and I think it's Indara's fault. I'm going to be bold.
I agree. Of all of them, I feel like Indara was the ringleader. Kelnaka and Torben went along. Torben had to go along.
I think Torben went along with it. I feel like Kelnaka didn't want to, and I think Sol might have not known what was going on.
I think the order that she chose them,
yes,
that May chose, is very specific.
Yeah,
I think she wanted Indara first, then Torben, then Kelnaka.
But she kind of went for Sol. I think we need to see what happens.
She went to Sol for Sol because Sol said, there. "Come get me."
He did. There's some. I think something's going on here, and this ends with this episode ends with May looking for Osha at the Bunta tree but can't find her, and that kind of is like separating the whole Born is two, like the one that kind of separates that and sends them onto the past that we see in the first two episodes.
And it's interesting here because we see from the first time a shift in May. Yes.
I think she was always leaned more into this intense, darker side. But I think this is where you see the person.
Like, I feel like her revenge isn't for the family. I feel like it's for Osha.
100%.
Which kind of explains why the interactions May had in the second episode with Chimere. Of like, Osha's alive. And May's like, really? You saw her?
So I think that is very insightful. This brings us to a few remaining questions and some of like the big ideas. Like, I think for me, this episode didn't offer as many big idea, like thematic lessons because it's really providing a lot of exposition. I think we'll be able to pull from when we get the rest of the story, which is one of the things we're going to talk about is I think we have half the story. I really do.
I agree.
When we see Osha wake up on...
I did not catch this in real time.
I didn't either. This was a Twitter find.
The only way I found it is because you told me.
And what we're referring to here is that when Osha wakes up on the Jedi ship, if you zoom in on Torben, he has the scar that he had on his face. And that was the second episode, right?
Yeah.
In the second episode. So I think that kind of there's obviously without something happened. Why were the Jedi there? All these questions.
Does Sol seem like the one to go off on his own and go break into the temple by himself?
No. I think whatever happened was orchestrated. And this brings me to the other thing I wanted to talk about is the Jedi versus the witches. And for me, I don't think that the answer to these questions are as simple as Jedi versus witches. I think this brings me to where I want to draw the parallels between Sol and Anastasia being compassionate, asking what Osha wants, asking what the kids want, and whether there's alternative motives in that. Those two genuinely seem like they care about what's best for the kids. And Dara and Coral seem to be operating on, and again, Coral, you don't want to like lump Coral into like being a bad mother. I don't think that's the case. But I think she is operating with the
big picture,
the coven in mind,
and
rather than Osha as a first priority.
And Indara was operating with the Jedi 100%. Or the Republic in mind. I feel like the Jedi were there to go eliminate the coven, which is very un-Jedi-like,
or at least remove the children from the coven, which would
end the coven,
more or less. I think that. I think the split between that, I think that's where the nuance is going to come, where we're going to learn more about all this stuff, is that the Jedi and the witches aren't necessarily the conflict, but the conflict between those two different conflicting ideas that are present in both groups are there. So that's my 2 cents on that. I'm just really excited to learn more. I'm excited to figure out what happened.
Yes, because something else clearly happened.
Oh, yes.
And Star Wars doesn't leave that many unanswered questions.
Never.
And especially not a question like, what happened? What was the catalyst? Because I feel like they sprinkled some stuff in. Like, if you're seasoning something, they gave you the salt. But you need the pepper. You need
we don't have the pepper. We have half the information. Overall, I'm going to ask you your thoughts. I love this episode. I thought it was really good.
Me too.
It took me a second to adjust to it being the entire episode and like us not picking up with Kaunaka. But I liked it.
I liked it. I liked that we finally just got to see it. Because again, we're humanizing May in a way we didn't get to see her before. And a lot of people, myself included, kind of agree with May. Like, Osha, what are you doing? This is your family. Why are you doing something that you know will put an end to them? And I feel like that's why May reacted so viscerally. Like, you can't do this. This will put us out.
Yeah. And I think for me, it... Sorry, lost my train of thought there. Wow.
Sorry.
I guess I lost it.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. It probably wasn't that important. Well,
I know as soon as we finish, we click stop.
You're going to be like, oh, yeah. Oh, well.
We'll turn it back on.
Oh, I remember. The Endara thing. The last thing I want to talk about. Do you have anything else before I talk about Endara? Most people know her as like Trinity from The Matrix, good guy. In Horizon Forbidden West, I'm going to spoil Horizon Forbidden West if that's okay with you.
Go ahead.
A member of an opposing faction is played by Carrie-Anne Moss, who is, the actress who plays Endara. And she's very friendly at first, but then you ultimately find that she's like kind of the villain. And I don't think Endara is the villain with a capital V, but I think Endara... I think I'm kind of wired to think she might be up to something just because of my experience with that game. So, I don't know. I think I might be a little harder on Endara than I need to be, but also I might be correct.
Only one way to find out.
The passage of time. Anything else to add?
No, I really enjoyed this episode, and I'm excited for episode 4.
Me too. With that, thank you so much for listening. Please consider giving us a like or subscription or review on the podcast platform of your choice. Please consider giving this a watch on our YouTube, which also is pretty cool. It has like a little waveform thing. Feel free to give us a follow on Twitter X at Blue Shadow Pod or on Instagram at Blue Shadow Podcast, and consider checking out our Facebook page. With that, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
See ya. Thank you.